Regular school board meeting for Monday, September 12th, 2022. We are currently allowing public access to meetings. We also encourage those in the community who are not able to be with us in person. They can stream us on our website. I will have Carlin start with the meeting opening and roll call and verification of quorum.
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Portson.
Here.
Mr. Wade.
Present.
Ms. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Ms. Rano.
Here.
Ms. Erler.
Here.
And Mr. Ebel is excused, and we have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Carlin. We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the first item on our agenda now is public comments. We did receive one email comment, but the individual who provided the email comment is also here this evening in person. And so he's going to provide both of his comments in person to us. And he will be speaking on 9B and 13, Goal 3. So if you want to give us your name and your address, please.
My name is Mike Summers. I live in Custer, Wisconsin. I'm addressing, I guess the email comment, as President earlier had said, is I had emailed it. I wasn't sure that I could do two of them tonight, so I wanted to get both of them in. But the first one is kind of I addressed the Educational Services Committee last week, so this is just a short summary of that. Item 9B. Unfortunately, the Educational Services Committee decided to create a Human Growth and Development Committee by cherry-picking members they favored. This action will create an echo chamber, in my opinion. The community will not be heard. Diverse opinions will be censored. The board members who vote to approve this favored members committee will send a clear signal to Stevens Point parents and community that they do not care at all about their children, but only want to continue to drive their agenda. I urge all board members to vote no on this item and form a committee through the normal application process. And I want to repeat, I'm not against a Human Growth and Development Committee. I was just in disagreement with how that committee was formed. That was my first comment on that item. The second comment is on item 13, and specifically item 13, Goal 3, on the goals, the superintendent board goals. I'll start with that. Board members, 22-23 board goals were presented at last month's board meeting. The outcome for Goal 3, communication, said, and I quote this, enhanced opportunities for community members to share top-of-mind matters, non-agenda items with the board. My opinion, a very worthwhile goal. After last month's meeting, it was decided to keep board goals on the agenda for further discussion, hence tonight's agenda. Tonight's agenda, however, does not include this goal outcome. Instead, Goal 3, communication, has changed to, and I quote again, improvement of the board and relations with the superintendent. My question to all of you is, what does this really mean? Listening is the most important part of communication. And if this board listens like they are supposed to, they will realize that Superintendent Hertzbrunner has been doing a fabulous job communicating to this board and the community alike. So then, what are we trying to improve here? Instead, now is the time for this board to listen to the community, and in particular to the parents of the children that are entrusted to you. Change that goal outcome to what was presented last month. Enhanced opportunities for community members to share top-of-mind matters, non-agenda items with the board. I sent suggested policy changes to each board member that mirror how surrounding school districts allow their community members to address the school board on school issues that do not appear on the agenda. I strongly recommend that this board take this policy change seriously and take action to allow our community to address you on school issues at school board meetings. I know that this will mean that Member Ebel, he's not here this evening, will have to come down from his 40,000-foot cloud, but after all, Mr. Ebel, even though you're not here, we did vote you into office to listen to us. And don't worry, President Erler, the policy change does not allow, and I repeat, does not allow community members to talk about their pet dogs during a meeting. So do the right thing. Talk about real communication with the parents and the community. Make worthwhile change in your goals and ultimately in school board policy, and let us speak to you. Build trust with the community through better communication, starting right here at the school board meetings. Leave the censorship to big tech and let us speak directly to you in public forum on real school issues. Doing anything else or ignoring this as a key goal tonight will be a vote against the community and will break any trust that you might still have left with it. Take positive action, improve communication with us, your community. Follow Superintendent Hirschberner's lead and listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move into item 5, which are presentations, and we have the communication report. Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello, thank you. If I could bring your attention to the communication dashboard included in your packet. We had media coverage of 66 pieces with a reach of about 8.7 million across our traditional online and print. So that is very reflective in what we would expect for as we start to prep for back to school. So much higher than we would see typically in, let's say, like a June or a July. So that is good news. We also saw significant increases in across our social channels. You can see there almost 200% increases across each of them, which again is just reflective of higher content and then families and staff re-engaging. So really happy to see that there. We also saw a significant increase of almost 300% in our inbound on social, which is great. It means people are using those channels to communicate with us and ask questions as we head back into the school year. One of our campaigns that crossed kind of August and into September was we invited folks to print signs for their back to school. Our highest internal engagement came from our food service team. Everyone printed a sign. Everyone sent one to me. I was so excited. So we shared that, and they got really, really great engagement. They had almost 8,000 reach across this just on Facebook, 2,500 post engagements, 400 reactions, 8 shares, and 27 comments. So just a great kind of reaction to the good work that our staff is doing. I was really glad to see that for them. And then I also just wanted to share, I put at your places Corey's 90-day plan. I know I shared that with you digitally, but I wanted you to have a copy of it. And the reason was Corey's just getting some really good feedback on that. And in the places where we shared that, so both our e-newsletters internally and externally, we saw very high click-through engagement, and it's specifically because of that piece. So I wanted to share that. Typically, we'll see like 3 to 6% click-through engagement on that. Externally, we saw 18%, and internally, we saw 51%. So, and much of that was driven by that. So I just want to give her some kudos for being willing to put that detailed information out there, and just allowing me to make it look pretty. With that, looking ahead, our school communication will transition now from that back to school preparation, getting ready, to here's what we're doing, asking folks to share content, telling those stories. We'll really be focusing on staff and student recognition content. And then I do just want to remind everyone, homecoming is September 19th through the 24th. So I'm looking forward to sharing those stories. It came up very quickly this year, but certainly there'll be lots of engagement opportunities for board and staff alike. And I will be sharing those with you probably in the next week or so. Thank you.
Any questions of Sarah?
I just want to say thank you. I don't think people realize you're a party of one, and you do so much to communicate. I also think that I love that you've shared the 90-day plan. I received lots of feedback. Just thank you both for your transparency and the good work.
Thank you.
And I wish we could say it's going to slow down for you now when the school started, but I don't think that's going to happen.
It's okay.
Well, job security.
I like my job, so it's good. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. All right, we'll move into item B, superintendent's report. Corey.
Sure. So the first thing I wanted to share is we have 3 board members that are receiving WASB recognition. WASB recognizes board members for their efforts in leadership and board development. So we have Barb Portson, who has reached level 1. We have G. Pope, who has reached level 2, and Judy Rano, who has reached level 2. So they will be recognized at the fall meeting on Tuesday, the 25th in Rothschild. So if you're interested in attending, let Carlin know. All are invited, not required, but if you're interested, just let Carlin know as soon as possible. Next, school board social media use reminder. Just a reminder, Shayna Lewis on 2 separate occasions recently had reminded us about board members, you should be cautious about using social media, personal social media sites for school district business that may create a liability for yourself, other board members, or the district. There was recently a ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that recognized that school board members were not required to use social media as part of their official responsibilities. However, their use of social media was nonetheless directly connected to their official position. So just be cautious about using social media sites for school district business. And then the September 26th board workshop is going to be at 5:30, thanks to all of those who got back to Carlin with a time that worked well. And then the 2 more things for me. Beginning of the year has gone amazingly well. Our students have transitioned wonderfully back into our buildings. Our staff are doing a phenomenal job. Buildings look great. We're finishing up our last 2 back-to-school nights tonight at our junior highs. I've been in the buildings, and things really, it feels normal, and it feels really, really good. So kudos to families, kudos to kids, and kudos to staff for that. And then lastly, just a shout out. We had 2 staff members that were actually leaving the site where they work during the day, headed to Spash to coach, and came upon just a horrific bicycle versus vehicle accident. And our 2 staff members took the lead of that situation and just did a phenomenal job. They cared for the injured individuals, they called emergency responders, they redirected traffic, and just shout out to them. I mean, that was a tough thing for them to come upon. Very heroic, and tells a lot about the kind of people that we have working for us in the district. So Kevin Hopp was one of those individuals, and Jean Lutenschwager was the other. So thanks to them, and they've been struggling a bit. It's difficult, you know. So anyway, we should be proud of the people that we hire and work for us. That's it.
Board, go ahead.
Dennis.
Just thank you for being in the building, being visible in the building. I know you've made it a big priority, and I know that's been very refreshing for many of our teachers to see you take that position. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis.
As far as the social media, I think that is a cautionary tale in terms of what we heard from our attorney, but I think in the review of that, it also talks about how social media is a powerful tool that probably isn't going to go back into the bag. So I think it is important that our board members know their responsibility relative to utilizing social media, but I also don't think our people who are using it appropriately, I think that's a good thing. I think it's another tool for people to communicate. I don't personally use it as such, but I know there are some board members who are using it very effectively and appropriately. And I'd also like us to continue to update us if there's any further legal opinions regarding use of social. Thank you. Media.
And I'm going to just comment on that too, because I have a legal background. And the court case, I think it's important for the community to understand. The court case found that there were 2 individual school board members who were using social media to provide just updated information about what was happening in their school district, as well as information about upcoming agenda items. And during the course of it, there were some members of their community that that provided negative response. And so the board members initially limited the comment, but then ultimately blocked individual parents from communicating with them. The court case came up in the context of the First Amendment. And what it found was that the 2 individual board members, even though they were on their personal social media, because they were providing substantive information about the school district, were an arm of that school board. And the school district, as well as the individuals, as well as all of the other board members, were found to be in violation of the First Amendment. And they're just other legal implications. And so I know, Jen, you noted kind of Sarah's like one, and she's our communication network, and Corey's another. She's our communication network. But it's really important for us board members to understand that no one board member, including the president, has any authority to provide substantive information to the community about our district. Our policies say in black and white that Corey's the spokesperson for the district. As president, I am able, if, for example, after tonight's meeting, if media would say to me, what did the board decide? I'm the official spokesperson that can say the board decided this. But it's only the collective voice of the board that I can communicate out to the community. I mean, I haven't been on social media for over 2.5 years because once we get elected to the school board, no matter the fact that we're people, we're parents, we're community members, we're business people. When we talk about school stuff, people look at us as a school board member, and they assume we're communicating it in our role as a school board member. And it's just really important for us to understand that. We do have a policy that says, no one school board member, again, is the spokesperson for the board. If we want to speak in our personal voices on our personal media, our policy asks us to let the community know that we're doing that. To let them know if I'm putting a letter to the editor in, or I'm putting something out on social media, that everyone knows I'm doing it just as an individual who happens to be a board member. I'm not speaking on behalf of the board. And in that way, we protect the integrity of the district, the integrity of the board as a whole, and the recognition that the superintendent is the ultimate voice. And through her and through administration, through Sarah.
Right, right.
But as you say that,
And I would like to,
as you say that, though, there certainly are some gray areas. Nobody on this board gives up their First Amendment rights.
That's correct.
And I think it's highly appropriate that we say, hey, don't go on your social media taking positions that you feel are representing the board when they don't, clearly, if you're an individual. But to use it as an information tool, that's it. I think there are going to be, down the road, there'll be lots of lawsuits in terms of clarifying how social media is worked, but I don't think we can stamp it shut to say, our superintendent and our board president and Sarah has they're appropriate to be voices to the community, but the rest of us, it's hands
to be
off.
silent off social media.
That's not at all appropriate. But I do agree highly with you that we can't be out there presenting the positions of the board as individuals, but to use social media as a board member in many times may be appropriate.
As long as
within the legal parameters and guidelines. And so,
Right,
and I
exactly.
feel like this discussion is probably, I don't know if it's directed toward only a couple of us that do use social media for school board usage,
Not at
but
all.
I just want to share that I have a one-stop curated page that is, I just reshare already published information. So nothing is, right, and I try to keep it just informative. But I do think that social media, just like e-learning, is not going away. I think that as a board, as we continue to get better, keep talking about best practices and how we can leverage that avenue for community engagement and information sharing, et cetera.
And if you hear something that seems to be generating a lot of questions or concerns, please reach out to me so that we can, if a few people have the question, there's likely many, many more, so then we can push something out that will help answer those questions.
And if you feel that a board member is using social media appropriately, I think it'd be very, very appropriate for you to contact person and say, hey, this is puts us, the district, in jeopardy.
In jeopardy, absolutely.
And there are other board members, I know that you have like you said, you share information, but there are other board members who might just have something on there, say, hey, I went to open house last night, it was really nice and positive. That's good.
Right,
I think
right.
that's okay to say that. On the other hand, you can say, this is how the board feels about everything, and I'm going to share it all right now. That would be, I mean, I might be right when I say that, but it certainly wouldn't be appropriate.
All right. Any other questions for Corey? All right, moving into consent agenda. And the consent agenda includes the minutes of the prior school board meeting of August 8th, 2022, the approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and employment recommendations. I am looking for a motion to approve that consent agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Second. Any discussion or questions on the consent agenda? I will.
I have one question. Can we discuss how we're doing with, do we have openings or things like that? Can we
You know,
discuss
G,
that now?
can I answer that because I forgot to mention that in my report? Yes, Beth gave me this information today. We have 2 special ed teachers at PJ's
These are openings.
that are open, yep. We have 1 school psychologist at the early childhood level, 3 bilingual EA positions, 1 bilingual parent partner, 1 regular ed EA, and 9 special ed EAs. And then, of course, we're always looking for substitutes and bus drivers.
Not bad, though.
Nope,
No.
Thank you.
yep.
Is that the answer? I mean, is that?
Well, I think that's a lot to have right now, but that's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
All right. Anything further? And I'll ask Carlin to call the roll.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Ms. Rano,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
and motion carries.
All right, we will move into business services, and we did not have a business services committee meeting, but I'm going to turn it over to Mike as chair to call up the one item on the agenda.
Yeah, we just have the one item that we talk about every month. Dr. Owens, would you like to cover
is here.
that material? Good evening. Yes, the paid to date, as you see there, 73.8 million of the total. Contracts issued to date is almost 2 million, 78.2. And the contract balance is 4.3 million to be paid of that amount. So we're proceeding right along. Most of the projects are all done now. There's a few things that are just being tied up, some punch list items, et cetera, and change orders are trickling in, and the billings and things like that are coming through. Perhaps on the next one, as I'd mentioned a time or two before, we'll add the interest earned in here so the totals go up, because we're looking to try to keep about 1.7 to 1.8 million untouched, so that we don't have to dip into the fund balance with that. So, so far so good. That's where we're at. Subject to your questions, that's the report.
Sounds good.
Thank you for
You're welcome.
getting it all done before the school year started. All right, we will move into item 9, which is educational services, and I will turn this over to G, who is the chair of Ed Services.
Okay, we had 4 things that we discussed, only one actionable, but I'm going to refer to Chris on as we go through these. The educator effectiveness presentation. Chris, if you want to elaborate on that.
Sure, I can just give a brief overview of what we discussed relative to educator effectiveness, recognizing that the DPI had provided a waiver for the last 2 years. Educators in the district have not participated in formal evaluation, so we shared a detailed timeline for both educators and evaluators, some substantive changes to educator effectiveness in the upcoming year that we feel will be celebrated by staff, the removal of the requirement to complete student surveys, and also the removal of the requirement to collect evidence and artifacts as part of the evaluation process. So that was an information-only item, but that was what our conversation centered around.
Okay?
Nope,
Could you provide sometime at a future board meeting, just an overview of what's left in terms of the evaluation process, using that? Like, what are we utilizing now, and what does it look like?
Sure,
Just a brief overview.
definitely.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, the second one, district data trends presentation. we had data from 2014 to 2022. Chris, again,
Yep.
if you want to talk
So
about
we
that.
had taken a look at some both state or standardized assessment data, so our state forward exam, as well as some local data in the forms of FastBridge, which we have data on for 1 year. We looked at some trends that we've collected and identified for the federally identified groups that the DPI disaggregates data for on an annual basis. We identified some longitudinal and historical underperformance for some of our marginalized populations, and the next steps really were to inform the development of school improvement planning goals at the building level. So it was timely sharing of that information with our leadership teams back at buildings. We are deeply involved in the development of school improvement plans and the action steps to support them moving forward. So that was an information-only item as well.
When are those due to you?
So Jeff and I have those due into the Educational Services Office by the end of October. And at that point, we review those individually with each building leader, and we provide feedback, and then they take those back to faculty. So it's a very collaborative process in terms of developing those goals and making revisions. So it very much is a living document. So once they're done in October, they're not done, put on a shelf, and then never looked at again until June. We bring those back out again in January, and we make revisions to the plans once we have our mid-year data, and the same occurs at the end of the year.
And at the building level, are there evaluative tools built into that document then?
There are, yes. So buildings have the autonomy to be able to select some of the local assessments that we have and that they utilize at the building level. FastBridge is one that we have that's universal across all K-10 levels, but we also have, of course, forward exam, and there are different tools that also some buildings utilize more consistently to evaluate progress in the area of reading and math specifically.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as I understand, that PowerPoint that you use will be made available to the public and to board members?
It's on, yep. And we
It
can
is
share
right, is it right now?
It's in board docs from the Ed Services meeting, so it's available currently.
Okay, so anybody can see that wants to, public and school board members?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right, another one was a calendar discussion about what to do with e-learning days. And we had some different plans that were presented. And Chris, you could talk about what's going to happen with those.
Sure, and we are in the process at this point in time. I think the only update that I would share is we're in the process of taking that feedback from the Ed Services Committee and developing a calendar or some options, and also creating some opportunity to gather some additional staff feedback on the options that are generated. Those clearly will go back to Ed Services and will come back to the full board for approval in the future.
So we'll see that again.
Yes, so we'll see that again.
Well, and typically, our calendar is, that calendar being finalized somewhere in that January,
Actually, yeah.
February period. So we've got some time to be able to have staff take a look at it and bring it back to committee and board as necessary.
Yeah, we intentionally started these conversations early, knowing that we had a little bit of time. But historically, the board has approved the calendar for the upcoming year anywhere between December and February. So we've got a little bit of wiggle room.
So this does not affect this year?
No, this does not affect this year. No, that's an important clarification. Thank you, G.
Okay. And then the last one is an actionable item. It's about the Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee. And because it's a board committee, we need to vote on the membership of that committee. We have a list in your packet, and I'm wondering if it's, can we put that list up on the screen?
We sure can. Can I?
Can we do that?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Why are you getting out of the way?
I just stand, yeah, I come over here.
You want them staring at you.
Nobody wants you staring at us.
We want to be looking at the screen.
Try. No one judge the number of tabs I have open across the top of my screen.
I had to delete my tabs today.
Tell me.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Okay, it's not picking up on. There we go. And I can share here, based on this list, you'll see that we have one member still pending, one member that is, we have left 3 communications for her. She's currently out of the country. But just recognizing that even if she were, for whatever reason, be unable to participate as part of the advisory committee, we are still adhering to school staff and spouses and board member and spouses making up less than 1/4, or 1/4 or less of the committee, which is required as part of statute.
And I counted 23.
Correct.
Once we vote on this, will any changes possibly be made to this list, subtraction or addition, or is this it?
So the only potential change would be Pam Beyer, who is still pending, right? And she had indicated interest in participating prior to leaving the country for vacation, but I have not gotten formal confirmation. So the only change that could potentially happen would be her being removed, and there would not be a need to replace her at this point.
And can we share for the community members what this advisory committee will do?
Yes. So the purpose of this advisory committee is to review the current human growth and development curriculum that we're currently using in the district. So there will be a review of all of the courses where human growth and development content is taught. And they will advise or provide recommendations or revisions to that curriculum. And then we'll take those recommendations back. And the final decisions or any changes to the curriculum that we're currently using will be brought back here to the board for final approval.
Just clarification regarding some of the public input we had. Are we following our own board policy in terms of how we selected or put together this ad hoc committee? Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So this, the selection of this particular committee actually falls under policy 9410. Am I saying the right? 94, I think it's Citizens Advisory Committee. And we have used citizen advisory committees in the past, and this process would be very much aligned. This process is also very clearly outlined in a document created by the DPI. The DPI has created a 424-page document to guide districts through the process of developing, reviewing, and implementing Human Growth and Development Committee. And the process that we followed in terms of gathering input from stakeholders, identifying stakeholders who would be interested in being part of the committee, is directly aligned with one of the options that's presented in the DPI resource guide.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
9140 is the
9140. Sorry.
In the packet, we had Fred Hebblewhite on here as pended. Is he now a no?
So,
Is that, okay,
yes, he was removed.
thank you.
Chris, at the beginning, you said these people on this list then will be tasked with looking at any courses that include a human development and growth component. Who decides? Because I'm looking at it, I could say almost every course involves human growth and development. So who's going to decide what courses it will be limited to?
So the courses that have been selected for review and the content from those courses were really taken from, and largely they land in the world of secondary ed. So Jeff Milsna has worked very closely with staff as well as myself to identify the courses specifically where human growth and development standards are addressed. So when we've used those standards to develop curriculum, those are the courses that we've selected, and those are the courses that we'll review the curriculum and the content for.
You don't happen to have those?
I would have to look at the list to see specifically what those course names are. Gee, I believe there are, at this point in time, I believe we have 4 that will currently be reviewed, but I don't remember the names of them off the top of my head.
Is that a possibility that you would, we could see that
Oh,
list?
absolutely. Yep,
Okay, that you would send it to us or something?
definitely. I can absolutely share that.
Okay.
It's sitting on my desk right now, but I just don't remember them.
And the membership of the committee is actually statutorily driven. So for members of the community, Wisconsin State Statute 118.019 lays out all of the information about if a district is providing human growth and development education, what are the recommended things that we provide and what are the mandatory things we provide. And it also requires our committee to be constituted in the manner that we're constituting it. It lays out the specific membership requirements. So it's state statute that drives the membership, and that's what the district and administration has been working on. It also allows any family, any parent who determines that they're not comfortable with the curriculum to be able to opt out from it. And we as a district, again, under that same statute, and people can take a look at that, we as a district are required to provide information to families about when we are providing this education and what we are providing. And then families have the opportunity to opt out if they so choose to do so. But I'm encouraging people to understand that, as with so much else in education, a lot of it is statutorily driven
Prescriptive.
and prescriptive, both through our legislature as well as through the DPI. And so this committee, and so when Chris noted that 25% or less of this membership can be employees of the district, that's because what the statute says. It's real specific. We have to have clergy members, we have to have members of our medical community, we have to have parents, students. It's very prescriptive of what it is that this committee needs to be comprised of.
Haven't parents had the ability to opt out of segments of curriculum all along anyway?
Any
Yes, they
curriculum.
have.
So that's nothing new.
It's nothing new.
So I know this is mandated, this, to have this committee in every school district is now mandated.
If we choose to,
If we
the
choose-
district has chosen to provide human growth and development,
Yeah.
which this district has chosen to provide via policy forever.
Is it a yearly review, or what's the cadence?
No, they say, so it's first as part of the design and implementation. So like several districts, we've been a little behind on the review and the assembly of the advisory committee. So we do have curriculum developed that we have been teaching. The opt-out and the review of the opt-out process and procedure, and even potentially form, will be reviewed as part of the overview of the curriculum and the content. And the recommendation after the initial review is every 3 to 6 years following. Yep.
So their whatever they develop then will be voted on by the board.
Yes. So we would have staff that are currently teaching those courses, as well as myself and Jeff, would bring forward the recommendations that came from the advisory committee work. We would present those, and there may very well be very minor changes to what we're currently doing in those courses, or there may be some more substantial changes to what we're teaching in some of those courses.
It would just depend on the voice of the advisory committee.
Exactly. Yep.
What kind of timeline are you looking for?
Good question, Barb. So we're hopeful. We have our first Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee meeting scheduled for September 22nd. So that's next week from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock. We believe that we'll be able to provide an overview of the courses and the content that's taught at an October meeting. That one will probably run just a little bit longer, probably about 90 minutes to potentially 2 hours.
I'm sorry, Chris, did you say a date on that one?
I did, September 22nd.
Yeah, that's the first one?
That's
How
the
about the
first one.
second one?
We don't have the date set for the second or
Okay.
the third yet, so when we have the committee together on September 22nd, we want to outline the scope of the work as
Sure.
well as the timeline, and then gather some feedback from the committee to indicate what date might work best in October. We also anticipate a follow-up meeting in November, which would mean that we could bring back the revised curriculum to board potentially as early as December or January,
Okay, and you said from 5 to 6?
5 until 6,
Okay,
yes.
thanks,
And that
Chris.
will be an open meeting. And we have the agenda developed for that, so I was just waiting for go on the committee membership here this evening, once that's done, and we will have that agenda posted by the end of the day on Thursday or Friday this week.
Just clarification, the committee's advisory, so the recommendations may or may not be voted in by the board.
Exactly. Yep, they serve in an advisory capacity.
Thank you.
And you said a 3 to 6 year revolving timeline. So are we going to, is it going to be a different group each time or
I would think so.
change? There'll be a lot of change from time to time. So we would be voting each time that we begin the review process?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think you made a good clarification earlier, G, right? It's the requirement in statute 118.019 to have a review or an advisory committee meeting if a district elects to, and we have policy 2414, which indicates that our district has elected to provide instruction on human growth and development specific standards.
Judy?
So just a question, kind of a follow-up to the open comment, since I wasn't on that committee or at the meetings. So how were the individuals on here selected? So I know that it's prescribed, the percentage of, so how did you actually?
So it was communicated on 2 separate occasions to gather feedback from the board. If they had recommendations for members of the community that could fit into any one of the required stakeholder groups. We also sought recommendations from members of our cabinet and our full leadership team to include associate principals, and coordinators. So that comprehensive group shared recommendations to me specifically. And I will say that we vetted all of those recommendations. Not all of them landed on this final list because in the process of reaching out and confirming both availability and interest, some folks didn't have both. So we weren't able to include every recommendation that came. But I will say with 100% certainty that Jeff and I did vet every recommendation that came to our desk.
What did you vet them for?
Well, interest and availability.
Okay, that,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
didn't know how deep this vetting
Right.
went.
No, like, here's the process, here's the scope of the work of this
Okay,
committee.
all right.
Are you interested? Are you available?
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
But we did contact every recommendation that came to us.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Any other questions? 'Cause I guess we're looking for a motion then to vote on the membership of this committee as presented.
I'd move to approve the slate of suggested committee members for the Human Growth and Development Advisory Committee, which the administrative staff has brought forward.
Second?
So I have a motion by Dennis and a second by G. Is there any discussion or questions on the motion? Dennis?
Just a quick question again, Chris. In years going forward, if there are people in the community who are generally interested in serving on this committee moving forward, is there anything wrong with them approaching the administration to say, hey, keep me in mind for consideration?
Absolutely
And that
not.
way, it broadens the scope a little bit about who is.
We would welcome that, or if there are community members that are watching now and would have an interest in serving on an advisory committee in the future, certainly contact a board member, Corey or myself, and we certainly will file that away.
But thank you, appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Okay, all in favor, vote yea.
All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed with nay?
No?
The motion carries.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
All right, we will move forward into student services. And actually, G, I'm going to have you do this because you're the chair to call that one up. That was not on your agenda. It's just an annual report. But if you want to call up the item 10, student services annual seclusion and restraint report.
Oh.
And
Well, all I know is the information I have in front of me. Caleb's right here.
Caleb's here to present.
I'm right here.
So just a
We
little
didn't discuss
a
this.
little background I can give. Caleb has to report this information annually before October 1st. So he is here tonight to talk about our seclusions and restraints that happened last school year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caleb.
All right, I did provide you a presentation, so beyond just the document that you have, I put together a little slideshow as a way to kind of reset and maybe as this year is gone, just kind of recalibrate what we're looking at in seclusion and restraint. I want to first start out by saying that seclusion and physical restraint, or any type of restraint, may only be used, and I'm going to reemphasize this, when a student's behavior presents a clear and present and imminent danger, which is a very new word that is put into the new statutes. When physical safety of the students or others is present and is in the least restrictive intervention feasible, and as we emphasize it, it is our last resort. It truly is used within our schools as the last resort beyond the de-escalation strategies that we have in place. A little bit of background. The Seclusion Act 118 was revised in 2019, put into effect in 2020. Those revisions included requiring parents to be provided a copy of a written incident report, where previously copies were only upon request. Now we actually send a written documentation or copy of those reports to parents. We clarify that the notice and reporting requirements apply to each incident, including when law enforcement officers are involved in those such environments. They've completely removed prone restraint, not something we've done in our district, but in the language of the law that was allowed before, it's no longer allowed. Revised required training components, meaning that every year we refresh. We do some training components we can talk about a little bit later. It also is required our district staff to debrief after every seclusion and or restraint incident or occurrence during this, like the work week. And we document that within that written report that we send out to parents as well. It also has officially given guidance to IEP teams or special ed teams as far as the frequency of meetings. If a student with a disability is restrained twice in a school year, an IEP team is mandatorily required to meet within 10 school days of that incident to review the IEP to see if there's any other positive supports we can put into place, or other type of interventions, and just talk about the situation to ensure that we're updating as necessary. So more guidance to what we have to follow within in our schools. They also did a little bit different for reporting out. Previously, up until 2020, we just truly had to report out on seclusion and restraints school-wide. Now we are reporting out, and you'll see this in your packet too, not only about the number of students who are involved, but also the number of occurrences involved within that as well. We have to report out of regular ed and special ed students. We report out on physical restraint, separated from seclusion. And so we do have to report out, and we have to have this visible. The other thing that we actually had to do in this new statute is to report out on individual schools within the district. So you'll have in your packet, and we'll show this tonight as well, individual school reports. That is new in this statute. I wanted to go a little bit further into this and talk about what an incident means, as the language is a little bit unique. We talk about occurrences versus incidents. You'll see occurrences, that is an incident. So anytime an incident or occurrence occurs, this is that one incident of immediately following a seclusion and or restraint. Sometimes if that event will occur for 20 minutes or longer, and it's that repetitive, like in and out, they'll consider that one incident because it is that same length of a situation. So schools aren't reporting out every time they have to do that physical restraint or the seclusion, but rather the incident entirely of what that looks like for that student. The other thing is we clearly define physical restraint, and it's a restriction that immobilizes or reduces the ability of a student to move freely, or a seclusion that involuntarily confines a student into a space. They clearly define what these were in the new statutes. I'm just bringing it forward so that as you review the information, you know kind of what we're referring to. Here's the timelines that our staff have to follow. As soon or as possible, it's one business day after the incident, we have to notify parents, 24 hours of that incident, we have to notify them that it occurred. We also have to make a written report available to them within that time frame and send it to them within 2 business days of that incident after consulting school staff and that debrief. In addition to that, these are the things that we report out. We do share out the student's name, the date, the time, the duration of those incidents, as well as the description of what that incident occurred, meaning what did we do before the incident occurred, what happened during it, and how did we help bring the student back into that school environment. We also have to report out that if there was any law enforcement involved in that, that's included in these things, as well as that written report must be kept at school, made available for review within 3 business days after the incident as well. So not only do we send this to parents, we also have a copy of it. So I hold all copies of seclusion and restraints within my office and we review them. Which leads us to our overall district summary. I'm actually very excited about this. I know this sounds like a weird thing to say, probably because it's my job, but I'm really excited about this because our numbers look really good. I know these are high, but when we look at the upcoming pieces here, this is consistent over the last 2 years. We have not gone up from the previous year. In some of our higher need schools, we've actually decreased their efforts through different positive interventions and supports. We linked in here the district summary, which you have, that did go over each of the schools, and we do report out on each of our schools. This includes if a student is outside of our district at an alternative school. So if we, as an LEA, send a student to an alternative school, whether CESA 5 schools or otherwise, we actually have to report, they have to send us reports of any time of seclusion and restraint. So I do monitor outside of our school environment as well if we place them. You'll see in here each of the individual schools, which we are required to report out on every year, and then that summary on the bottom. One of the things I also wanted to share, which we've been brought up in the past, is I wanted to provide you a historical breakdown of this. This goes back to 2014, and you'll see over the course of the last 7 years, our numbers have gone down tremendously. 2019, 2020, that was the year where COVID kind of hit, so there was a couple month gap that we weren't in school. But if you look, we've been staying really consistent, even amongst what's been going on. And I'm really happy to report that the school staff, the efforts that we're doing, has drastically dropped our numbers of restraints over the course of the time that I've been here and even before my time, which is really exciting to share out. Same thing with seclusions. We're dropping these incredibly. We're doing a lot more de-escalation. We have more people trained within our school environments. In every one of our buildings, we have a trainer, which for our crisis intervention or crisis prevention intervention, or CPI, as we often hear it. Every building has a CPI trainer in their building to provide hands-on training and supports for their staff, as well as being able to debrief accordingly to our training that we have. Okay, that was a lot of information, but I'm excited to be able to report that. That was one of the fun parts about this is, like, I always get nervous when this time comes up because seclusion restraints are really tricky, but I'm really excited to be able to share that we have reduced over the course of the years our seclusion restraint numbers, and with our populations and such, I'm really excited that we're able to find alternatives to doing that. So I would be open to any questions or comments the board has.
Good. I guess we got Chris and then Jen
I'm
and then Chris and then
Yep.
Jen and then Judy and then
All right,
And then Barb.
and then Barb.
we'll go around.
We'll just
Yep,
go around.
Yep, we're good.
Caleb, when I look at
Yep.
the bottom numbers, seclusion and restraint, so special ed, 72 occurrences.
Yep.
And 22 students.
Yep.
Is it safe to assume that there are a number of students who had more than one occurrence?
Yes. Yep.
That's-
Yeah, when we do a root cause analysis, oftentimes those 72 occurrences come from the same student. So it's, in many of the situations, if you look at the district summary and some of those reports, you'll see that breakdown. A lot of the times, we have 1 or 2 students, maybe a handful of them in a building, that unfortunately, this is like that space that we have to do in order to help re-regulate and sometimes just co-regulate with them for a certain period of time. So yes, it is multiple times that a student may go through this
The
situation.
second question I have is, who would be writing up the report?
It is typically our school psychologist, it's a case manager, it's our school principals that do it. It is typically the person who is the first on site or part of that process.
Okay.
They are trained on how to write these reports. We walk through that every year with their teams. And then again, we do review them within our office. So as we review and we see some updates, we can provide suggestions on those reports.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Jen?
Yeah, so Caleb, there is one school here that has significantly higher numbers, Roosevelt, than others. Do we use this
Yep.
data to inform support
Yep.
that we give them, additional support?
Yep, and so over the last 2 years, that individual school has been identified. We did do a root cause analysis of it per DPI too, and we realized that there was that they were doing the right things. There was a couple of specific students that needed additional supports, so through an IEP process, we were able to add additional supports for those individual students that were causing the highest rate of occurrences, and providing them the additional support that that building needed to address the situations.
Thank you.
Yep.
Judy?
I just wanted to say I liked all of this. The definitions, what you're doing, the follow-through, a lot of times, working where I was before, you have the incident, you address it, and then move to the next one.
Yep.
So that, I think, the follow-through and having a trainer in each building, the comfort level of the staff to actually do the de-escalation is huge.
And the training has switched. So I've, coming from a former teacher, doing this as often as I have, the training has really shifted into de-escalation. The focus is on the de-escalation cycle and being able to manage a student through the emotions and through their situations, realizing that if an event occurs that danger is imminent, that we may have to go hands-on, as we would say, but they really emphasize everything up until that spot. And the training has emphasized that. We have emphasized that as a school staff. But it's a debrief. It's a talk about, like, what happened? How can we support you? If this occurs again next time, what does that look like? And I think that conversation is so vital to being able to support in the event that it might occur again. So, thank you.
Barb?
I was just going to ask if all the training was the same, if everybody's doing the same process.
Yes, yep. So we are required to refresh our trainers. They go through the same training, the same one district-wide. We also have one of our student service coordinators overseeing the whole thing, so there's continuity to it as well. And then we do discuss it as a CPI training team in the fall, which typically are school psychs. So our school psychs are typically our trainers, with an addition of a principal who actually wanted to do it. We have a couple of other program support specialists and teachers that were up for it, so that there is consistency among our trainings.
Thank you.
Just first of all, your numbers are laudable. Those are great numbers, so congratulations. I was wondering, I know you hit it on a little bit, but I'm wondering if a future board meeting at some point you might expand a little bit on the strategy, supports, and policies which we're utilizing, which help us not have the isolation restraint, but also help protect our teachers and also help protect the integrity of our instructional setting.
Yep.
So I'd be interested in knowing what's taking place underneath that,
Yes.
in order to support the fact that we're not doing that. But I can tell you, I'm very, very impressed that that's the numbers we have relative to isolation and restraint.
Be happy to.
Jake?
Caleb, why so high at Roosevelt, and Washington has fairly large numbers too, and then other schools have zero?
They're isolated. It's truly, sometimes it's the students that are within. So what you're seeing is a couple of higher needs students within those buildings that we're trying to work through how to program with them accordingly to be able to provide them a safe instructional space, as well as providing the rest of the staff. So within both of those schools, and I can tell you honestly, I've been there working through the situations, there are individual students that were needing higher level of supports. And so some of those occurrences occurred early on as we were working through the programming of those individual students.
So over a long period of time, we would expect this to not always
Yeah.
be at a certain. At
Yes, yep. Our goal would be not to have those
Outliers.
occur higher. And again, it's hard because sometimes we get new students in those buildings, and as we work through new students, sometimes we see that initial programming a little bit higher, and as those positive interventions go into place and some of the strategies that we have can get put into place, those numbers will drop accordingly as well.
Yeah, and I just say too, I've been it was a couple years ago, I've been in a room where an incident happened, and it was amazing to me. The person who took charge was intimately knowledgeable about that student's IEP and acted accordingly. And it was incredible how well the situation ended up for everybody.
And I'll add that when we hit those high targeted students, we emphasize what the students' strengths are, their high interests are, so that we can try to steer a situation into the other path And then we put positive interventions in place, we put break spaces in place. Oftentimes, we'll even, in some of those schools, they had break spaces in multiple areas of the building, because that way, no matter where that student was, they had a place for that student to be able to de-escalate on their own. And so we really try to provide an educational environment so that they're not having to do transports. You know, those historical practices, we don't want to see that. We want to provide them where they are learning so they can get back to that educational space.
Caleb?
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, we will move into our item 13, which is general, and we are moving into the school board superintendent goals for 2022 and 2023. And I will turn that over to the subcommittee.
All right, so we were asked by the board to go back and kind of revisit the goals that we created based on the feedback that was provided. We made some changes, most substantive to goal number 3, which was referenced today. And we'll go through every single one of these goals. And so I will hand it over to Barb to go, or sorry, G to go over goal 1.
Okay, this, I think we already do this. I think we just wanted to codify it, that superintendent or designee, which would mostly be curriculum directors, would collaborate with the committee chairpersons to make the agenda and develop the agenda for each school board meeting. And the part B, the communication, the director of communication to receive key highlight items. And I think we've done this just as a matter of form, but I think we're putting this in writing, and we want to make sure that we do this all the time. Okay? So that would be part 1.
And then for goal 2, Barb.
Okay, that, our second goal is to deepen community engagement as well as our engagement with the schools. We'd like to pilot for this next school year that board members would be assigned an option, actually, for them. If they don't feel comfortable doing this, they don't need to. But those of us that would like to serve as a liaison for a school, the superintendent would assign our schools, you know, like we had discussed. I'm at Roosevelt and Plover Whiting frequently, and so I probably won't get assigned those, so I can go out and meet some of our other staff and our families. And we can either, because there's 9 of us in 9 elementary schools, we can start it that way, or we could add the secondary schools, pods, Fernandez Center, to that as well. And it would just be to, one thing we talked about is you would be, the superintendent would contact the principals and say, here's your liaison person. Feel free to contact them if you want them in the school. But we would, when we want to go to something, we would make a contact with the principal, so there's no surprises. We're not walking in judging teachers or anything like that. They would be well aware that we will be at their event. And it doesn't mean that we can't go to the other schools. It just gives the principal somebody to contact.
Okay, and then for goal 3, this one was the one based on feedback from the board members in the last meeting. We had a meeting with Corey and Chris. We changed it to provide additional avenues of communication and collaboration as it relates to the board and the superintendent. So 3A is to reinstate the use of a board development tool, and so we kept that generic. We haven't decided which particular tool, and we'd love for the board, to determine. There's several tools. There's a school perceptions tool, there's a WASB survey tool, there's an internal tool that was created, but to use a tool to review findings, facilitate discussion, use that data to inform how we can better ourselves as board members as part of continuous improvement. And in terms of timing, we weren't specific, but G did suggest that we use it as soon as possible. so that we can use that data to kind of redirect anything that we would need to in terms of opportunities that we find as a result of the development tool. Part B, 3B, is to build a strong board superintendent relationship. We have a new superintendent. We feel that it is imperative that we have strong relationships with her and we build trust and credibility as part of that process. And so that's 3B. Just a reminder that all of these goals we created, we wanted clear success measures, and we are tying it to that one school perception survey as it's related to the school board, with hopes that that number is increased next year. That's it.
So I will open it up for questions and conversation.
Do you want us to comment on each 1, 2, and 3, or how do you want us?
That would be, yeah, I think,
Okay.
well, why don't we start with 1?
Okay.
Let's start with 1 and talk about that, and then we'll be able to have that full discussion on that, and then we'll move into 2 and then 3.
So I guess if I were making a comment on 1, I think we are pretty much doing that, but I think that having the administration and the chair of the committee work together, knowing that, I think the relationship, I think we're doing that now. If there are concerns, I believe that they will come up with, if there's an item that's perhaps our committee chair would like to bring forward, working with the administration, they would be able to understand we're already doing that, or we need more information to put that on an agenda and that. So I think I like number 1 a lot.
I do too, if I could add, the goal, the enhance the committee structure piece, I think that's a hurdle that we've struggled with in the past, and we still continue to struggle. In fact, G and I had a specific example from last Ed Services Committee that he wondered why wasn't, that topic on this board agenda. So I like the enhanced committee structures because I think we still need to have continued conversation about what goes on committee, what goes on board, what goes on committee and board. And I'd like to work through that with the board on how can we solidify what is the goal, the purpose, and the expectation of those committee meetings moving forward. Just my input on that one.
Oh, that's fine. Oh, and I just wanted to preface that, thank you to the 3 who
Yes.
volunteered to give the 9 of us the right direction. So it is appreciated. Even if there are things that we don't agree with, the work I really appreciate.
Yep.
And also to say, oh, go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you.
You had your hand
Just
up.
I'm glad to hear it's something that we already do, but it may be something that people have been confused on, otherwise I don't think we'd be talking about it now.
Yep.
I think it is supported by our policy that the chairperson has as much authority in terms of what's on those committee as the board president. That's why they work, or the district administrator. That's why they work hand in hand in developing that, or with Chris in this case. So I'm glad to see that it is being codified as you indicated, but I'm hoping that moving forward that this won't be a question, because it's pretty clear that
Right.
it's all our intent to do it this way. It's pretty clear it's based upon policy that we're doing it this way, and it's pretty clear that's a goal of yours as well as committee people to have that kind of communication. So, good stuff.
Well, it is is noted right here, our existing committee policy provides for this.
Right.
What I can say practically is, we are elected officials who all have different responsibilities in our existing lives. And so for some board members, it's a sit-down meeting with the administrators.
Might just be a phone call.
For some committee chairs, it's a phone conversation. So that has been both the responsibility, but also the ability of that committee chair to work with the administrators that are kind of direct reports to that committee to create how that happens. But it's always happened. It's just been different people handle it different ways as chairs.
And I think that we've had this discussion in the past, but I firmly believe that the administration will be bringing topics to the committee chairs that they are unaware of, because they have the insights and background of what's happening. On the other hand, I want to make it very clear that if a committee chair or members of the committee through the committee chair say, hey, this is important to us, that becomes priority number one, because that is why we have committees, and that's why we have board committees, and that's where board has opportunity to bring things up. They don't have, as an individual, I can't say this is the way it's going to be for the district, but through the committee, that's where we have our voice. The most important voice we have is that kind of input. So, I think I'm assuming it's going to function very well moving forward.
And that's already happened with the e-learning days that Jen
Yeah.
mentioned. That's where that discussion
Yep.
Came from. I have a question about B. I'm not aware of any mechanism by which information flows directly from that meeting to our communication director. Do we want to do that, or does that flow to the board and then our communication director to make public, say, the PowerPoint that I was talking to you about?
Right, so most of the information that we shared, whether it's information only or action, would be available in board docs. Currently, Amber, who is my administrative assistant, joins us for those committee meeting conversations, at least in the ed services arena. And the minutes that she collects from that meeting are available. I'm not necessarily sure whether or not those are shared directly with Sarah.
Sometimes they are shared with Sarah, and I think the intent behind this was if there are things shared at committee that don't come to the board and they're like very positive things that could be shared out, how can we do a better job of making sure that those items get shared publicly with our staff and with our community and our families?
Right, so there's a lot of things that we don't action
Yep.
at the committee, so it wouldn't get to the board, but there's so much good information. It's not live, streamed, and
Right.
so how do we do a better job of informing our community of the good work we're
It
doing?
wouldn't fit on our dashboard, it would
Right.
have to be
Not necessarily. but we
relayed
can
some other way.
We can embed it in other communications that we currently have, and we've also talked about adding additional communication measures that we can leverage.
Because just to put it on board docs, there are probably a lot of people aren't going to look at it there.
Right.
We've already seen, if you want people to know it, it has to be put right in front of them.
Yep.
And she would be the person
She knows how to do it.
develop how to do that.
Yeah.
But we haven't, I don't recall us saying we have to get this to, to.
You're right, we haven't formalized that, and I think that would be a good thing. And I think maybe I can circle up with Sarah, and we can come up with a more formalized structure and process to be sure that that information gets shared. And I'll be more intentional at the conclusion at those ed services meetings to specifically call out or ask for recommendations of what we'd like to communicate in that manner.
And also the fact that it's public. When I started, I wasn't aware it's public, but
Right.
Yep,
we might know, but a lot of people.
don't.
Yep.
That's a good point, G.
Okay, so any more feedback on goal 1?
The only thing I'd like to say about it is, I know on business services, I don't know if I really need to talk to the superintendent or Dr. Owens in advance of the agenda being developed. Not to say business services is routine, but buses and new roofs, I don't know if we need, I would feel bad if somebody on your staff was required every month to contact me in advance, because of this.
Business services is a little bit more routine. They tend to follow a calendar where certain things come up during, each month that needs to be on the agenda. I mean, in my perception, I think how business services is currently running seems to operate well. As long as you and the director have, a communication style that's working for you, I think that's sufficient.
I think that would be fine. It does say collaborate monthly with committee chair in advance, and I would hate for them to feel that's a
Right.
directive they have to follow, as long as I was comfortable
Yep.
not doing that, so.
Dennis?
I think any chair should have the right to lead their committee any way they see fit. On the other hand, I don't think there's anything routine about our finances in this district. I think that when we're developing the budget, we should have input from our board, and the board should have questions, and there should be things, perhaps there should be things coming from the committee to questions to the finance director and others to say, what does this mean? What's going on? So I would not like to think that that is going to be a one-way communication, because the finance to this district, the budget's our district, it entails, it's everything we do, it's our lifeblood.
Right.
So I would certainly expect that board members would have input, questions, and communication with those leaders to clarify it, because we represent the public, and the public is very interested in our finances at least once a year when they get their tax bill.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and I know you're not trying to say it's just passe, it's just, I know that's not correct, but I just wanted to reinstate that it is, I would expect as a member of that committee, that there may be times when we have input and questions and things that we want on the agenda to discuss because it's important to the community
Absolutely.
and to board
I think you
members.
misunderstood what I
Yeah.
was saying, Dennis. I was saying, there's things that happen.
Yeah, there's lots of things that
Right.
come up, it's
That
very
are-
prescribed, I agree with that.
Yep.
But there are all those little details in between which are very important that we might want to have discussions on.
Right.
Thanks for clarifying it.
And
Let me
Dennis, yeah,
clarify,
go
the only thing I'm talking about, Dennis, is sentence A, the superintendent or their designee collaborate monthly with committee chair in advance of the posting of the committee agenda. That's the only thing I'm talking about.
What if you have something you want on the
I would say
agenda?
that I would, in my case, I would not want you to be
Inclined to.
required
Right.
to
Right.
contact me in advance, or I'm just talking about this one sentence.
right.
But what if there's something that you want as the committee chairperson, that you wanted on the committee, how would you communicate that how would you communicate it if you're not communicating?
I'm
how
not
would you
talking
communicate
about all that, I'm talking about the one
So I
sentence right here
think
that
it's
says.
semantics.
you
So-
have to contact me in advance.
So I guess, and this will be my one comment, I just want to step back.
Thank you.
And because I believe that if we as board members feel that there's something that should be coming forward to the board, that we should and this has been, again, it's the practice that we've had. I'm not saying it's the practice that will continue, but if we as a board member, whether we're the chair of a committee or we're a board member, if we believe there's an item that needs to come forward, there's an idea we have, that we are hearing something from the community that we feel needs to be addressed or looked at, we should be reaching out to administration right away.
Immediately.
And not to have it like get on an agenda, to be able as individual board members to have that substantive conversation with the superintendent and with appropriate administration to best determine how to move forward on that. Many times, those matters get resolved long before they ever make it to a committee, or long before they make it to board. Sometimes they do come through, as with the calendaring that Jen raised. They come through committee, they come through board. But ultimately, it's very important before something comes through committee or board that administration isn't hearing about it like the week before the committee, because often they need to step back, do the research, do the groundwork, do the determination of what is going to come forward to committee. And what we as an individual board member might think is what's supposed to come forward, oftentimes isn't what ultimately comes forward after that board member sits down with administration and really talks through substantively, well, what is the concern? What is the issue? Is it currently being addressed in our district? Is it not? What are the resources we have to make it available? So I just want to make clear, for me, I can't recall a time that I have brought forward the week of agenda setting on the board, an item I think should go on the board agenda. And I don't believe committee chairs should be doing that either. I believe that all, the committee chair position, frankly, and the president position, we're all nine equal. And we all have one vote. My job as president is to run these board meetings. That's when my responsibilities happen. Mike's job as a committee chair is to run that committee meeting and to do the research about what's coming on that agenda, to be able to run that meeting. And, you know, that's the same with G. And so in terms of items coming forward, I just keep encouraging board members, if you've got an idea, if you've got people in the community reaching out because they've got a concern about something, reach out to Corey that day. Explain to her, let her know, you know, where appropriate, which it typically is, who that individual is, where that problem's happening, and allow the people working for us to, because 99% of those issues get resolved at the building level. So in terms of a committee chair bringing forward items for the agenda, well, again, I'm going to say, I really believe it's more, just like you and I, when we sit down and do the agenda for the board, it's G sitting down with the administrators working on that agenda and working through what's that committee meeting going to look like? And do we have our ducks in the row to be able to provide that information to the community? But if you're someone and there's something happening, don't wait to try to get it on a committee agenda or try to get it on a board agenda. Let's try to get it resolved right away for the people who are struggling, or the student that's struggling, or frankly the staff member that's struggling.
Well,
So, sorry.
I
It was
agree
kind of a-
with most of what you said, I agree. I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that committee chairs and committee members do have the right to bring things to the agenda and put it on the agenda.
But it may
And
not
there's
be on
also
that
time-
agenda, Dennis.
Oh, no,
It may not be on that
no, that's fine, that's
agenda
fine.
in a week. It
No,
may
that,
be-
I understand that. And the second part is that there are topics that, sure, I could go to the superintendent and he or she and I could discuss and work through things, but there are some things that are worthy of the entire board to discuss as a topic. And I guess the proof is always in the pudding, and we've had this discussion before. If there are issues, we can bring them to the superintendent, and the superintendent will work on them, resolve them, and hopefully sometimes bring it back for the full board discussion, because that is appropriate. And anything less than that becomes a filtering system for communication, and we don't want to ever do that. So yeah, I agree with most of what you said, but I'm not going to give up the right of board members to help set the agenda in those rare instances when we have things that we consider to be a priority, or the right for boards to actually have formative, healthy discussion as a board rather than one-on-one with the administrative team, because we do function as a board. In order to function as a board, we actually have to communicate as a board as well for certain items.
Absolutely.
90% of them, they probably go through, in this case, Corey, and it'd be resolved, but we have the right and the responsibility to have an expanded communication and transparency.
And that's
And
what we
this
have.
is going to be part of our board superintendent relation.
Right.
I mean, if you hear something, please let me know as soon as possible. I'll give you the information I have. If I don't have it, I'll find it. And if it's an issue that you want to talk about as a full board, I just want to make sure that I'm prepared
Absolutely.
before I bring it here.
Nobody should be surprised on Monday night.
Absolutely. I just wanted to reference that the bylaw, though, does state, Megan, while I agree with you, and I do go to Corey often, the bylaw does state that, I mean, suggested items by committee members and chairs should be considered. And so we just had that here.
Right.
And I think that was important to G, that it was a part of the goals.
And I agree with that.
And I do think it's just as a practical thing, is if one of us, a member of a committee, wanted to bring something to the Ed Services Committee or the Business Services Committee, that Corey would know about
Absolutely.
before we walked
you.
in there with that.
I
Yep.
agree.
I think we're all saying the same thing.
Okay, so can we,
In different ways.
should we move on to goal 2? Feedback on goal 2? Okay.
So reading through this, I wonder if the goal itself maybe needs to be rewritten, maybe like the title of it, because as I read through this, I'm wondering how this strengthens community engagement, it strengthens board, school engagement,
We-
not community engagement.
We talked about that last time, there are events we would say that it happens at the school where parents are also at, right? If we have board members that are at, and I don't know, back to school night or some ethnic fair event, that's where you would see parents and, guardians, et cetera. So that was something that was raised. And Chris?
So, yeah, and I agree, Judy. So if the goal is to deepen community engagement, and this is just my opinion over the years, there are a lot of people who know me as a board member, and they know me as a community member because we have hundreds of school opportunities and community opportunities to engage with the schools and the community. I'll give you an example. Today I went to the Sparta Luncheon. There were a number of retired teachers there. Carol Colby is now the new president, who is one of our committee chairs. I was introduced, I talked to a number of the people there. The Portage County Business Council has a business dinner after hours once a month. I usually attend. You're given a badge if you belong to a company, but mine says Chris Scott, school board member, Stevens Point Area School. I have directed a number of people, introduced myself to a number of people there as someone on the board. Directed people, they had concerns, directed them to places. So community-wise, the community has all kinds of things going on that we could be at, and I've been at a lot of them. The school district has many. I went to 5 of the back to schools, attended them, met the principals, some of the teachers, some of the parents. I am not sure, reading this, why you would have to be a liaison to a school, one person. Anything a school has going on, all board members should be available, if they're available, should be able to attend. Why should a school reach out to only one board member to attend something when we govern as a board? All of us should be able to do that. I'm looking at this saying, there aren't any things here that say to me, a board, and it's not that I don't want to be in the schools. I want to go, and I know Sarah's given us a lot of information about what's coming up. I don't know why one board member would have to be a person in a school for that school. What is the purpose there? Yeah, go ahead. I mean, it's a concern for me because I know that if a board member is in there, people know it's a board member. It might be a good thing, it might not be. Are you going to go in and talk to the principal? Are you going to talk to the teachers? Are you going to talk to the parents, the kids? We have that opportunity. There are many opportunities that our board members can attend to and have that relationship. So I'm not really in support of that.
Okay.
I am in support of us. And Sarah, we had talked about this, internal and external contact with our schools, with our community. And I'm doing that. I think a number of us are doing that. I don't see why we need one person, or if 4 board members decide, does that mean that to the community it looks like 5 board members don't want to be, that? And I don't think that's fair. I don't want to feel like that if I say, no, I want to go to all the schools or all the events I want to.
So the reason that we drafted it this way is because and we started by looking at the school perception survey. We let the data help to drive the goal.
Right.
And the data says the school board is doing what it takes to make our district successful. We're in the first percentile. Best practices show that you build trust and you build credibility and you build rapport if there's several touch points. Mm-hmm. So it's not just going to Washington one time and then going to Roosevelt. We also heard, we've heard feedback, and this was the 3, that we are not visible as school board members. So if we are doing that, right, you said being in the schools, et cetera, we're not doing a good job based on the data point, right? So we wanted to do something different. We also heard from Chris, who did share that this has been done in in neighboring districts successfully, and it's been. I think if we have staff and teachers that feel that it's not a good thing for a board member to be in the buildings, I think that's a perception we have to work on changing because it shouldn't be a negative experience.
Right. So what, we don't really have anything here that says, here is what you are going to be doing.
So,
If
we do.
someone invites you, and I
We do.
read
Yeah.
the back part
And-
that you have on there, I read that. But we really haven't said, this is what you're going to be doing, and this is why. If something was developed like that, and we had a clear understanding of what you're looking to do, other than, I don't know, I might be able to look at that and say, that might be something. And I also don't think the largest population we have, Spash and the 2 junior highs, I would want all of our schools. I'd want Boston School Forest. I'd want PODS. I'd want them all included in a plan that we're doing that with specific information saying, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, and here's how we're going to do it. And we don't have that here.
So we were asked to create guidelines, and we
Right.
didn't want to be prescriptive on
Right,
purpose.
right.
We wanted because all of us have different professional lives, right? And
Right.
so based on availability, we didn't want to be prescriptive. We did speak with Corey and Chris, and we said it is imperative that each board member, if they're assigned to a school, that they contract with the building principal in advance. No surprises. Beyond that, we are elected officials and adults, and I believe we need to trust our board members to know that we have the best interests of the schools in mind, right? So
No, don't
I hear you saying you're
disagree. I don't
afraid or
disagree.
there's fear.
No. I'm saying there's not what is the actual job of one board member in a school? When are they going to be in the school? When there are classes, they're going to go into classrooms. There isn't any.
I don't think we need to get that prescriptive. I think
No,
it's going
you
to
can
vary
do
based on each board member
whatever
and the
you're
relationship with the
comfortable
building
with
principal.
doing. Maybe it's going to a
So I
concert.
think
It's just my
so let's-
opinion. It's
so-
not the
so-
right answer.
So
It's
for
just my
me,
opinion.
we kind of had, in a similar way, we had sort of the same discussion when we were talking about Corey's goals. Because we had Corey's goals, and then we had Corey's entry plan. And the conversation for the board, as I recall, was let's approve the goals. And let's understand that the entry plan is a work in progress and a work in process. And that if we can come together to support the goals, and then we can work, and maybe send this, the liaison back to Chris and Corey to say, all right, if we want to move forward using that as a tool under our goal for item 2, then let's have them bring it back to say, okay, this is how we're going to do this. This is how we're going to assign schools. This is how we're going to work with the principal. This is how we're going to put together kind of the framework for our district moving forward this year. Is the board member going to be at a different school each year? Should we try the pilot of, for me, it's for tonight, I guess I'm wondering if we can, as a board, say, let's focus on the goals. Let's focus on that, enhancing the committee function and communication are the 2 parts. The second one is that maybe the goal is better to deepen internal and external community engagement. And right now, we just have the one part. We're focused on the internal. Maybe that other part is, how are we going to focus on the external? And then with the third one of providing those avenues of communication and collaboration, it's how do we as a board do our self-evaluation to provide us with some information about how we can improve our board function, as well as that parallel goal with Corey about the board superintendent relationship. So that we can tonight maybe focus on those goals with the idea of sending back, in particular, the liaison for our next board meeting, for Corey and Chris to come back, so that so that board members all have sort of an understanding, if you're gonna take on this role, you know, here's what your responsibility is gonna be. And here's, because,
Meg, that's not what our intention was to begin with. We had a couple of board meetings ago, we thought it was important to bring that number up from the school perceptions. Our goal, it was important to us to say, okay, you three board members get together and come up with something. And we got no suggestions from anybody else. I don't want to put it back on Chris and Corey. It's not their goal. It's our goal to get out there, talk to parents, talk to teachers, talk to students, whatever that takes, whatever you're comfortable with. It's important to us to make a better effort.
Maybe a little compromise. First of all, Chris, I want to commend you on how much you are in the schools, and I know that to be a fact, so thank you for that. Perhaps we could agree that those board members who are interested could be assigned to be liaisons this year. Now, obviously, if we don't have all board, and I would not expect we'll have all board members who want to participate in the first year, but we're not going to be able to go to every building, and because it's just not practical. But on the other hand, if we agree that we're going to have liaisons, maybe there's nothing wrong with sending it to the administration and saying, what are the parameters that you feel comfortable with? Because we don't want to be bumping up against administration. And so I think we can agree that we are going to have liaisons. We can agree people can inform the administration if they're interested in being liaisons, but there's nothing wrong with the board, with our administration come back and say, hey, here's some parameters that we think should be in place so that this is all something we're all comfortable with. And I don't think that is asking too much of them, and I don't think it's going to be highly complicated, but it helps us as we go in, because now we know that whatever we're doing has a stamp of approval from the people who are going to have to put up with any kind of negative feedback based upon it. I think it's going to be a wonderful experience, and I think it can be a wonderful experience. It's certainly, if Wausau can do it, Stevens Point can certainly do it.
I'm comfortable
Okay.
doing that, Barb.
I
So,
hope nobody's
yeah,
watching.
I think we could do it just fine, and I think we will do it just fine. And in the end result, it may be worthless. And we may come back after a year and people say, what was all the discussion about, because it didn't mean a thing. It may come back where Chris says, hey, that was really cool, I want to be part of that now. But we don't know unless we do it. Right now, our goals are pretty light. I mean, they're really goal light. This is the one item that would actually change something a little bit, and I think it's a good thing, and let's give it a shot. And again, I understand how some board members may not want to do it. That's great. I mean, no problem. And I'm not going to come and smear it in anyone's face. So, oh, Chris is in here doing this. You know,
No,
that's
I don't-
ridiculous.
I-
So
I
anyway,
don't
let's
go that way.
let's just give it a shot. Let the administration come through and make some, some parameters moving forward, just as Meg says, and give it. Let's see how it goes.
And as the goal is written, we would come back in May, right, to say, okay, to your point, Dennis, is this worthy of moving forward? If it is there anything we need to modify, or maybe we just scrap it if we find that it's not beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Given all the time that we, and commitment.
It is listed as a pilot.
Yes.
so-
Gee, did you?
In that respect, everything's a pilot, because we can.
Could be.
Right.
I would resist being too restrictive on this because, well, for the last couple of years, we've been encouraged not to be in schools, because of COVID. So we kind of lost our way there a little bit. I like with the bold part here on the back where it says as a school board member, we go, and I trust everybody here, to go into a school and say, we're gonna be there, we're gonna pat people on the back, we're gonna say wonderful things, we're gonna do wonderful things with that school. And I think this proposal was that because we didn't want to say just, well, everybody get into the schools. Okay, what does that mean? We wanted to do something directly to say, we're going to do something about communicating with staff and parents and students and being visible rather than to say, just be visible. It's an attempt to do something substantive to increase that percentile, or just because you want to. I was at McKinnon, or Madison for the opening day, and I bet in 5 minutes I probably made more connections than I had in 2.5 years, and that might be me. But without exception, staff was overjoyed to see somebody walking around, a school board member. And I know, Corey, you said before that there would be principals and staff that would have a problem with that. I don't know, maybe they would, but I mean, the principal there was wonderful. They wanted to see you. And to me, it's the difference of saying, kindergarten teacher goes to the principal and say, can you invite the board members over to my thing? I'm gonna do something really exceptional next Thursday. Or say, can you invite Dennis back over here? Because then I have a more direct connection to say, and then call Dennis instead of just putting out it's a general, you're all invited. And it's a more intimate relationship. They can pick up the phone and call somebody instead of just the board.
Right. And I think if we define the clear expectation for this, so that principals know, so that staff know, and board knows, it will help everybody, just to understand that there will be, this individual that you might see walking around your building or attending concerts or open houses more frequently, because they are the liaison.
And not intended to restrict too, and I picked that up,
Right.
G. I would not expect them to come back and provide restrictions, but they might say that, this is how the administration will choose which buildings. They may say that you're expected to, every time you enter the building, meet briefly with the principal. You're expected to, whatever. I mean, that's kind of stuff, but I would not expect them to restrict us, because it is our goal and it's our desire to do this as a board, I believe.
I don't ever
Absolutely.
see anybody going to a school unannounced.
No, I know
walk
that.
around.
I know.
You will always call the principal as a matter of
Courtesy.
personal
No, no.
courtesy.
And that goes for not only the board members who's the liaison, because one of the other things that we did talk about early on in this is really, and Sarah has been providing more of that upfront information to all of us about activities happening in all of our buildings.
Opportunities.
And so that's another piece. Again, it's not a board, what we're doing, but is what our district is
Right.
doing to be able to better inform us about what those opportunities are in our schools that board members are welcome to come to.
It's a personal touch.
Yep.
Because
Right.
after being there for an hour, I know we have a new art teacher. I know we have a new instructional interventionist, and I talked with her, and I wouldn't know that otherwise. And if I said I want to go around to all the schools, I'm not going to remember that. But this year, I'm going to know what the vibe is at that school and be happy with it. Because I wouldn't go and say, everything would be positive. It has to be positive, or you
All right,
shouldn't be
well,
there.
it sounds like, I'm been mindful of time a bit. So it sounds like item 2, we're kind of coming to some consensus on that. I'm hearing that we're going to, I guess for me, it's the goal is deepen community engagement from the board, but with the understanding that this current pilot is related to more than internal community, but also the importance that we as a board continue, as Chris noted, to figure out how to continue to create that community engagement external.
Would we be able to approve tonight, like 1 and 3, if 2's coming back?
I
Vote
would
on
like
School
to
year's
just
gonna
vote
be
all of
over.
it tonight, yeah, because I feel like we've already done 2 rounds
How
of this.
about you approve all 3 goals and then allow Chris and I to create the expectations and the process for number 2?
I'm comfortable with
And
that.
bring
Sounds
that
like a
back.
great idea.
We don't even need to bring it back, really, if
Right.
you're comfortable with that. Let's just let us,
We can just
in-
communicate that.
It's like, if I call a principal and say, hey, I'd like to be your liaison, well, what's that about?
Well, and that's.
You would tell them, this is a
Exactly.
loosely
Yep.
structured plan to become more familiar with the people in our
the
district.
process will be from my office.
Right. And Corey and I can communicate that out with leadership so that they're aware of the expectations. I think the one thing that made Corey and I really comfortable in these conversations was just the idea that there really is an embedded tool that allows us to be able to monitor the impact. And it's not to say that we might not get to May or June, look back and see what school perception results come back and say, oh, that didn't work, we need to scrap it and do something else. But maybe we continue doing that, but then we challenge ourselves to come up with what else we can do. And I think we think about true community engagement and building relationships with stakeholders. That's an important way to operate, right? So look at the impact of the work that you've done and then make a determination about whether or not you need to add another layer to that. So I think that was something Corey and I felt really comfortable with when we had the conversation.
So when are you gonna share that?
Judy, I think,
Oh, I'm
Judy,
sorry.
you had a.
That's okay, I just wanted to say thank you for the clarification and the focus on the internal, and then how do we do the external engagement, even though we will touch, you know, parents, but there's still a larger community that we may not reach. And then for goal 3, not to derail, you know, when I look at what's under there and what we've talked about, I don't see communication in there, even though that's part of collaboration. It really is, to me, when I look at it, board development and collaboration. That's just because we're looking at that board development tool. So to me, that's more board development and collaboration instead of communication.
Second one's more the communication and engagement, and the third one's more
Yes.
yes, I would agree. Yep.
Are we talking about the third one now?
Are we moving to number?
Kinda open the
Yes,
gates.
we're seeing into the
Okay.
third one.
So, yeah.
Yes.
On the third one, just so, you know, we've got some input on the fact that we've altered it somewhat. I think that communication, feedback from the public, feedback from our staff, and feedback from our stakeholders is a high priority, I would imagine, for every board member. The reason it's been altered somewhat is that it is also a high priority for our superintendent. And our superintendent has asked to take the lead on feedback from our stakeholders, including our staff and our community. And since she's done that, I feel very comfortable in saying, okay, let's see how that goes. And at the end of the year or sometime in the year, she'll report on what kind of progress is being had. And also we'll get feedback from our community and from our staff to say, do we feel like we have more access to share our views and our perceptions, our wants, our needs, our thoughts. And, you know, I'm feeling very confident that they will, given the leadership style that we have. But that is the reason that we've altered. We have not changed. I don't think any board member said that's not a priority for us. And some of our, some board members, it's more a priority than others. And I think it's a passionate priority to have feedback from our stakeholders. But we also recognize that our superintendent has asked to have that as one of her chief goals, and she wants to take a leadership role on that, and I'm willing to, you know, give her those reins, personally.
This is a board-only evaluation, though.
Yeah, I was referring to the fact that we altered one of our goals from what we talked about, I think, last month.
So, and to Judy's point, I can alter the language to say board development and collaboration. The communication piece is no longer a part of the goal, but I think to Dennis's point, it's important for the community to hear. We do recognize that they want feedback and input, and Corey has shared that she would like to take lead on that, and we would reassess if we feel like we need to change it for next time.
So in terms of that board development piece, I know Corey shared out with board members the tool that we've used, that we used in 2018 and 2019 as a board. I think we used it in 2016 and 2017 as well. And then it went on a like everything else with COVID, it didn't happen. And so I think what we're looking for is probably feedback from board members, maybe to take a look at those different kind of, because they're really, it's a board assessment tool for the board. But to be able to take a look at that, and maybe provide feedback to Corey as to where people are leaning in terms of a particular survey tool, so that they can, again, so that we can, you know, we can keep moving forward to get one that we can bring forward to the board again, get the board's approval on, and then be able to use that.
I would want to do it as soon as possible, but because if we keep putting off month by month, then it is going to be March.
Well, and
Could we vote to do this tonight, and then I'm comfortable with whatever Corey determined, right, based on our feedback, would be the
Yep.
survey tool?
Yep.
Well, I did look at the survey tools. They're very different.
Yes.
The one is strictly board meeting
Right,
That's a
concerning.
WASB,
Yeah.
right?
No, I didn't think so. The WASB one was, there was one in there that was just all about board meetings.
That's the school perceptions, WASB survey.
Yep.
Yeah, the other two are ones that this board created based on other evaluation tools from other districts.
But the WASB one, we can compare to other boards.
Correct.
Because they have other information. The other ones we can't.
Correct.
So I guess are people at a place,
Corey, so when will you be coming back for the number 2, the parameters?
Once Chris and I determine those parameters, we'll just share them out with you, share them out with leadership team, and then we can start moving forward. And part of that will be, let us know if you're interested.
once,
Yep.
okay.
If you don't get all 9 board members, you've got 9 elementaries, how would you?
We would double up.
Yeah,
Some
I'd
would be assigned
probably
to
ask
two.
some if they'd be interested in taking on more, and some may have more time in their day to do that than others.
Are we going to say it's important that all elementary schools are covered?
I would say yes.
For the pilot, yeah, when we started with elementary, just to pilot.
Yep.
And your principals will be fine with this?
Honestly, I've not gotten formal feedback from them yet. I think they'd be interested as a pilot to at least try it.
I think, Mike, it's important to note too, I know Barb G and I received emails and feedback from teachers, I should say, and staff that were very supportive of this goal and said that they've not seen anything like it, and they were very welcome to the idea.
And Mike, informal feedback that I've gotten from members of our leadership team has been positive and receptive as well. So I wouldn't anticipate any apprehension.
Thank you.
All right, so, can I get a motion from somebody?
Move to accept these with the feedback from Corey and Chris and change in communication to board development.
Second.
Okay, any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor with aye? Aye. Any opposed with nay? All right, thank you. Now I gotta find my way back to the agenda.
It's my goals.
Oh, now it's Corey's goals. So,
So,
ahead.
at the last board meeting, you approved my goals that had asked for me to come back to implement the measures for success. So, goal number 1 was to support the 2 new directors through frequent and ongoing meetings focused on student learning and positive outcomes, as well as growth for all. And how I intend to measure that is through surveys that will be administered to instructional leaders, academic interventionists, and the leadership team to measure the support and direction provided throughout the year. Number 2 was the budget evaluation decision model, and how I plan to measure that will be the actual development of that tool and then the initial implementation of that model during this school year. And then number 3 was to create a strong superintendent and school board relationship. And how I plan to measure that is to create a survey that I will give to all of you that will measure my success in building a strong relationship with each of you individually and as a board. Things that I might look to measure would be, am I giving you the information you need to make good informed decisions when you're here? Am I available when you have questions or concerns? Are we working on a trusting relationship? And how are we communicating with each other? So those are just some sample ideas that I have in that tool. The other is, and Sarah already talked about it, the 90-day entry plan. This is an example of a tool that I will use as part of my goals and my evaluations.
Wonderful. Do board members have any questions of Corey with respect to those? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
we are moving on to the item B, which is the WASB Board of Directors Region 5 representative. And I am looking for a motion to approve the submission of Jennifer Bushman's nomination for election to the WASB Board of Directors as Region 5 representative.
So moved.
I got a motion by Barb and a second by Chris, and a tie.
I think Chris was a little faster, honestly. but-
I am pretty fast.
But Barb was louder.
I am louder. And I'm next to candidate.
So any discussion or question on that motion? Hearing none? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? And good luck.
Thanks.
Moving into item C, which is the future meetings, dates and times. We are going to have a board workshop, EDI workshop, on September 26, 2022 here, and the time
5:30.
is 5:30.
Any idea how long that workshop is?
No longer than an hour and a half.
Okay.
Between an hour and a half.
I have to let my dog know.
Bring
Just
'em.
kidding.
And then we have the regular school board meeting on October 10th, and then we have our budget hearing on October 24th. That typically starts with, we are required by law to have a public meeting that we've traditionally done at 6, and then we have done the board meeting at 6:30. So that's what we will be looking to do for that second meeting in October.
Question on the 26th. So the EDI portion of that, is that at 5 or is that at 5:30?
It started at 5:30.
Everything's at
Everything was.
5:30.
Okay, and so the workshop is right after?
It's the workshop, that's the
That
entire
is,
meeting.
okay.
The whole thing.
You said September 26th, is that?
Yep. September
5:30.
26th, so, and that's going to be conducted by
Sam and Gigi.
Sam Diggin and Gigi are going to be conducting that for us.
Okay. sounds
All
like
right.
fun.
So, moving into item 14, I am looking for a motion to go into closed session under Wisconsin statutes 1985, paren 1, paren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business, specifically possible authorization to negotiate land purchase. Could I have a motion to go into closed?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Chris and second by Jen. Any discussion or questions on that motion? Hearing none, I will have Carlyn call the roll.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Ms. Rano,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Ms. Erler.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, so about 10 minutes, and then